This week I wanted to cover off business transformation without executives. I saw an article probably a week or two ago. Someone had written within my network on LinkedIn about, oh, you really don't need executives in order to make a business transformation. And, after 30 years of doing things like business transformations, um, you know, for me, it originally was based in turnarounds of companies. Um, but, the concept has evolved over time. And, I think what we have to be clear on when we're talking about business transformation is what our operational definition is of business transformation. I mean, are we talking about the whole system in which you operate, the entire organization? Are we talking about one aspect of the organization? And you know, when you're looking for systemic improvement, a business transformation of a functional area is, from my perspective, nonsensical. I mean, the whole concept of a transformation uh, is systemic improvement, making the entire system better. And, this is different than, let's say, process improvement or, the limited scope of a functional area. And to me, it's the difference between being, it's at the front of all of my videos where I have I think there are 6 videos associated with the difference between being an efficient or an effective executive. And if you're going to be effective, when we're starting to talk about business transformation, which is ultimately where my executive education course goes, is that business transformation has to involve the entire system. Um, so there are certain problems that you run into without executives. And I have done business transformations without executives. And let me give you practical experience from doing it. First of all, one of the requirements that I had was basically the square root of an organization. So if you have 400 people in your organization, you got to at least have, 20 people in the organization that would do some type of transformation, within the organization. But the problem you have is sustainability, number one. In other words, you know, you might do some really great things, but if the executive team isn't on board, they will make changes that counter maybe some of the good things that you did. Or, as I found out over the years, new management comes in and they just change it all because they know better. And that's the problem with the sustainability, and not whether they really know better, but they think they know better. Um, and So they bring in the power, and therefore the sustainability of doing a business transformation without executives really does come into question. And you're always going to have some degree of the sustainability issue. If the system is actually working well, then a lot of the things will be kept, or you'll have the opportunity, if you're organized around it, to make your case to the new team or to some executives that are doing some things counter. Um, so sustainability is one of the big issues. Organizational barriers. If you are going to be doing work in a new way, let me just give you an example. There might be a contact center that needs to have access to some financial system in order to do end-to-end work for the prototype that you're building, those types of things. People just can't, from the front line, go to the executives and say, hey, we need access to that. You'll get pushback. It's happened in every organization I've ever been in, is, you get pushback even when you have the CEO often in the organization. Oh, it's too much risk, and there's those types of things. So in order to come up with a new system, you have to be able to think in terms of you know, getting access to things that maybe you normally wouldn't have access to. So these organizational barriers that are built into the organization become problematic if you don't have executive sponsorship or someone out there that can remove the barriers that you need. The other thing is you need resources, and the biggest resource that you need are people in order to build this new thing that you're trying to do in a business transformation. And so that's a third thing. And then the fourth thing that I wrote down was organizational restructure. So if you're going to move from a functional, separated work where you have sales and operations and finance and everything separated the way that it is, and you're going to work in a new way, that functional separation of work usually doesn't work in a business transformation when you're talking in terms of maybe a systemic customer integration, where you're using synthetic thinking, you're using your knowledge of the customer in order to rebuild the organization. And if you're going to restructure things, we don't really need a technical lead in that area. That's just not going to fly. So a business transformation often requires really different types of thinking in that organization. So how do I approach it? I approach it from the standpoint of something I call the 95 method. And just general stages that I have. The first thing is developing synthetic thinking skills. And that's why I do the executive education course, so that people kind of get the concept of what are we talking about? What's different? What's the difference between analytical and synthetic thinking? And being able to look at the whole. And it's something that has to be learned. It's not something, it's more innate for you to be able to have analytical thinking, because we all thrown apart things. But seeing the whole requires different thinking than most executives and people within the organization that need to develop these skills in order to come up with a really systemic solution. And I achieved this by in this stage by studying the organization customer in, finding out what's important to customers. Development of what I call customer creed then becomes a list of things that are important to customers that we want to keep in front of everyone in the organization, not just the people who deal with customers on the daily basis. And that's really one of the advantages. If you understand within your organization, whether you're in finance or IT or whatever, what's important to customers, then you have an opportunity to have this touchstone that I call the customer creed as something where these are the truths about our customers, and we want to make sure that we honor those, because we listen to them, we understand them, and not just from a bunch of data and sheets and those types of things, but actually listening to calls or observing customer interactions and listening. All those things become part of the first part. And then from there, you're able to get kind of an area of opportunity. A sense of, if we built we did a business transformation and we built a new type of way of doing work, what might that look like, and how would it be different than what we're doing today? And to me, that's where you start. That's stage one. I do something, it's a $1,500 investment, which is a lot less than what I see organizations waste their time and money on without a direction, and basically taking just a piece and beginning to understand what the area of opportunity is within the organization, have better understanding of, what a customer in design or a systematic or systemic customer integration might look like within your organization. So now you have something that you've built and at very high level, and kind of be able to make decisions about what's the next incremental step that I might want to take as an organization. And that way you're putting in a small investment, walking through a structured way of understanding a business transformation might look like for your organization. And then the second stage, the decision point at that point is okay. We need to build a prototype, and we need to start getting others educated at the executive level. And we take maybe a team of 5 to 12 people with some type of. You'd like to have the entire executive team, obviously, doing it now. Time and those types of things come into play. So you typically have 1 or 2 sponsors that you're keeping up to date with. When you get to the end of a decision making point, let's say at the end of the first stage, then you're at a decision making point. Then you're probably presenting to the entire executive team, and they're coming in. They're getting involved and actually doing some of the exercises, listening to calls and interactions with customers, and then they have some knowledge to be able to make an informed choice of whether they want to go to the second stage, which is building a prototype, which is more of an investment at that point. Now, I've coached people through stage one. I've done it with organizations. Now I just want somebody that's got some expertise in this, has done it, a couple dozen times in organizations. That's where my role comes in. But I don't force that. I mean, if people want to do stage one on their own, that's fine. I just I provide support in the $1,500 investment, where I provide them some phone calls and some emails and things of that sort, just to kind of get them through that stage. It takes a little longer, sometimes a lot longer, but and that's okay. Go at the pace that your organization needs to move. But moving from a stage one, that's a small investment. Now you're getting into stage two. Now you're looking at a little bit bigger investment, having a team of the 5 to 12 people, building a prototype, going through iterations of how can we do the work better. The executives being engaged and educated at that point through the kind of the stage two process, so they can understand what's going on in there. Done it many different ways. It takes a very special person to be able to get through stage two on their own. Sometimes that involves my engagement more fully, and possibly even getting at least kicked off, so that they can then get an outline of what they need to do. And again, all I do is make the process go faster. If anybody can do that. If they've got 3 years, they can do it. It sometimes takes a couple years. Sometimes I get a really sharp person that I'm dealing with, and maybe it only takes a year, but I begin to build a prototype, with the people, and going through all these stages in essence, and making choices about things. So that's kind of the outline that I use, the approach that I use. You kind of do it in a small chunks of things, making decisions, making informed choices about moving on through each stage, and basically then having a new way of doing the work. There's a lot more obviously to it, but it kind of gives you a sense of how I approach it in these palatable bites of chunks of stages, I guess, and so they can see whether it's worth the investment or not of doing something bigger within the organization. So anyway, I'd seen this thing on LinkedIn. I don't again. I'm not sure exactly what it said. I kind of only had time for a glance at it, but to do it without executives is really tough for the sustainability, for removing organizational barriers, for getting the resources that you need in order to build a prototype, having the organizational structure have to be redone. Usually is going to involve executives to make it work fully. So anyway, that's what I wanted to cover this week. And remember, there is always a better way.